habla español. Voy a empezar en inglés, ¿está bien? Cool. My name's Stephen, I work at Twitter. Can I get a show of hands, first of all? How many people use Twitter regularly? Say every day. Okay? That's good. How many people are using Twitter right now? Okay? That's good. That's very good too. Do people remember this? Small events. So this is one of the classic photos from after the European Championship final in early July. And this photograph went around the world. It was on newspapers, it was in TV, all around the world. This photo, though, you only saw if you were on Twitter. And this one is of Andres Iniesta, Spanish midfielder, in the locker room after the final, kissing the trophy. And this photograph, for me, is an interesting one because it captures one of the remarkable things about Twitter. And that is, Twitter enables you to see the world through somebody else's eyes. Somebody you know, somebody you don't know, somebody on the other side of the planet, or in this case, a player in the Spanish winning team. And it's this first-person perspective. It's an important element of Twitter, and you see again and again. Now this one is a beautiful representation of Twitter in the European Championships. And I'll explain exactly what's going on. It's over the 3-week period, and it graphs the number of mentions that each country got on Twitter during those 3 weeks. So you can see the undulations as countries started off during each match. There's a spike, and by the way, at the bottom you can see the individual Spanish matches. Spain had 6 matches, Ireland, unfortunately, only had 3. But by the end, you can see that the red and the blue of Italy and Spain were largest. And this graph is amazing for me, and it captures another remarkable thing about Twitter. Because this visualizes something that was not possible a few years ago. It's a representation of a global conversation between people, many of whom never met, who don't know each other, in at least 16 countries across Europe, but actually across the world, centered on a shared experience. And that shared experience, in this case, was the European Championships. And that's amazing. This is something that technology and the network of people on Twitter has enabled that was impossible only a few years ago. And you might ask, what does this mean for businesses? Because I know a lot of people here are marketers, but I think it's very important for businesses, this notion of a global conversation and a shared experience. So this, and if you're a marketer, an amazing way of communicating with the consumer is to somehow tap into this conversation in an authentic way. And so with that in mind, let's just take a step back for a moment and think about the history of marketing. So traditional marketing was done in the form of an interruption somehow. In the case of TV, the message, the advertisement came in as quite a harsh interruption in the middle of the content. Display advertising on a website, for example, the banner ad or other display ad is around the content. So somehow the communication from the marketer is an interruption in some way. Canvas has been an interruption. And what I mean by canvas here is, canvas is the medium on which you paint your picture or you tell your story as a marketer. The canvas has traditionally been an interruption. But on Twitter, the conversation is the canvas. So think back to that conversation during the European Championships. A conversation on a shared experience. Imagine all the opportunities for marketers, if they're skillful, to tap into that conversation and the emotion and passion that goes with that kind of shared experience. So on Twitter, the conversation is the canvas, and it provides amazing opportunities for marketers. I'll give you some examples now of how Twitter has been used to this end around the world. This example is from the US, and it's a NASCAR race, so a NASCAR auto race in the US, and the NASCAR driver is called Brad Keselowski. And this photograph is from inside the cabin of his car after a crash on the racetrack. And in case you can't read it, he says, "Fire, my view." And the photograph of two crashed cars up ahead. So he took this photograph from inside his car with his phone and tweeted it during a race. And he has a lot of followers. And here is one of the responses. "Do you seriously have a phone in the car?" So people couldn't quite believe this guy was carrying a phone and he had the presence of mind to take out the phone and take a picture and tweet. He actually replied, "Maybe." So it turned out that he took the photograph when the car was stopped. There had been a crash. The race came to a halt, and they were cleaning up the track. So he was sitting there, not much to do, took the photo and tweeted it. This is interesting for a couple of reasons, though. First, because it reiterates that idea of the first-person perspective that I mentioned earlier on with the Iniesta photo. You're able to see the world through the eyes of somebody else. In this case, a NASCAR driver, maybe in a sport that you don't even normally watch. But the second thing that's pretty interesting is that if you're a business, a brand, a marketer, there are all of these events going on out there that are impossible to plan for, but that you can somehow tap into if you're ready, if you're mobilized. And there was a very interesting response by a business to this. It turns out that Tide, people heard of Tide? It's a Procter & Gamble brand, cleaning products. And it turns out that Tide is part of the cleanup routine after NASCAR races at Daytona. And when they were cleaning up the track, this happened. This was one of the scenes. They were cleaning up the track, no race was going on, this photo was snapped, and the Tide brand had the presence of mind to take advantage of this quite fast, and they sent out this tweet with the photograph and created a caption competition. Now that created an enormous response on Twitter. There were thousands of retweets, so their message got rebroadcast throughout the network to thousands of people, to the followers of thousands of people. A huge amplification effect. And then there was a massive conversation response as well, where people replied to the brand. So this is just one example of the kind of thing, things that you can do if you're ready, if you're mobilized. And it presents, I suppose, both an opportunity and a challenge. The opportunity is that these events happen all the time. The challenge is that it's hard to plan for them. You just have to plan to be ready. And is your business actually fast enough to respond to an event like this? Another example is Twitter can be a canvas for broadcasting content. In this case, it was a Porsche car launch, but by broadcasting content, it could be breaking news or whatever. In this case, the 911, the new model of the 911 was launched earlier on this year, and as you know, it's an iconic brand, and there's a lot of fascination about the car. So Porsche had a big launch, and they had a 90-second clip. I'll show you the last few seconds of it here. In the 90-second clip, they showed lots of different old models of the Porsche 911 over the decades, and then they showed little glimpses of the new model and had a dramatic build-up. I'll just show you the last few seconds of the ad, and then I'll tell you a little bit about it. the Twitter profile. This is the Porsche profile page. Let me just show you some of the responses to this one. There were hundreds of replies. The golden age of the sports car has begun again. The new 911, forever the sports car. So a huge conversation was built up around this event, the launch of the new 911. And one of the most amazing things about it was the engagement rate on that particular tweet. So, and by engagement I mean somebody clicked on it, they retweeted it, they favorited it, or they replied. The engagement rate was more than 50%, in fact 52%. So you were in the minority if you did not engage with that tweet. Now, in the context of the kind of engagement rates that we usually get on, for example, display ads, that's really quite amazing. It's orders of magnitude, nearly 2 orders of magnitude larger than what we would normally get. And these are the kind of things that you can get on Twitter if you create your content in the right way. Another example is for driving transactions. And Bonobos is a retailer in the US, and I have a Spanish example coming up next, by the way. But Bonobos is a retailer in the US, online, focusing on men's clothes. And they've been a pioneer on launching exclusive content and sales on Twitter. So one of the examples that they've done is a Twit-exclusive, where they open up a sale if they get a certain number of retweets. In this case, it was 65 retweets. They'd open a discount available to people who are following them. And there are a couple of things to note. Well, one, they hit that retweet mark within a couple of minutes, so the sale was unlocked. And the second thing is, they understand that they want following bonobos to be valuable. So they don't necessarily offer everything across multiple media. They offer certain things to their followers only, which adds value to following them. So they had this amazing response to one of their early exclusives, and they've really been a pioneer in this area. Now, another final example before I move on to some other things is from here in Spain, and this is Volkswagen Spain. How many people came across this Followers example? Anyone? Okay. So this was not long ago, and it was a good example of a very creative use of Twitter. And what Volkswagen wanted to do was they created this advert game, an advertising game, which was fully integrated with Twitter. And what happened was, if you followed Volkswagen España and you tweeted using the hashtag Polowers, the Polo followers, you would be able to play the game, and you would, with every tweet, advance the car along the road. And essentially, in the end, one of the followers would win the car. And so this was an amazingly creative use of it. And they did a number of interesting things here. Here's some examples of their tweets, but they integrated using the Twitter API to create this game and have the tweets and the profiles of the tweeters and their followers show up on their game. And it was somehow exclusive, and it was creative, and it's just an example of the kind of things that you can do. And it drove results for that. It drove results. So not only did they reach more than 10% of Twitter's users in Spain, they increased their follower base by 50%. There are very concrete results that you can drive from campaigns like this. Could I ask how many people here are familiar with the advertising products on Twitter? Okay, relatively few. I'll just briefly explain a little bit about this and how it might differ from using Twitter organically. So first of all, there are 3 main ways that you can use Twitter to promote your brand or to advertise. There's promoted accounts, promoted tweets, and promoted trends. And I'll go into each one. This is what your profile may look like on the mobile and on the web. This is what promoted accounts would look like. So on the left-hand side, we will normally suggest people or brands for you to follow as a user. And what promoted accounts does is it enables you to purchase the top spot there. And you can target by interest, so that you'll only show up for people who have interests that are aligned with your brand. And it's a second price auction, and it's paid for on a cost per follower basis. And what I mean by that is, you as an advertiser only pay if somebody clicks on and follows your brand. You don't pay for an impression. So it's a great way to ramp your follower base. The second important product is promoted tweets. And this is really the centerpiece of Twitter's advertising strategy and our promoted product suite. And this will appear, a promoted tweet will appear just like a normal tweet down the timeline. So a promoted tweet starts life as a normal tweet. And then as a business, you have the option to promote it. And you can promote it according to interests, to target people who have interests that are aligned with your brand. And one of the reasons why the engagement rates have been so high is because there's not really that disruptive element. It just appears down the timeline like a normal tweet. And it's paid for on a cost per engagement basis. So like the promoted accounts, it's not paid for by impression. You pay as an advertiser only if the user takes some action, either a retweet or a reply or a favorite or a click on a link. And then promoted trends is the final one, which is a way to ignite some brand buzz. And you can see on the left-hand side here, what you'll normally see on Twitter on the normal screen is trending topics. And there'll be a number of trending topics. You as a brand or business have the opportunity to purchase the top one on a 24-hour basis in your country. And that's a way to ignite some sort of storyline that you would like to instigate. And so I think of it a little bit like a campfire, that you can ignite it, you can set the spark, and then use a hashtag, for example, to encourage people to gather around that fire and continue a conversation. So it's been used very well to go in parallel with some other type of launch. Now moving on to the audience, this is one of the most important parts of my presentation, because I think it goes to the heart of what Twitter is and how Twitter is different. And this is on interests. Twitter is about interests. And for each of you who are using Twitter right now, you're following some people you know, you're probably following some people you don't know, probably following some businesses, and a range of other entities. And each of those entities represents an interest or a set of interests. So behind the faces and the logos and the brands, there's an interest graph. And it's a public interest graph. All of these, Twitter is totally public, all of these interests are public. So for me, my interest graph looks something like this, for good or for bad. And I should point out that this is not to scale, because my wife is Renata on the right-hand side, and you'll see that football and Twitter, even Barack Obama, are actually all bigger than my wife. So this is not to scale, but it's somehow a representation of my interests. And when you look at it, within a few weeks or a few months of becoming an active user on Twitter, Twitter had a knowledge of what I was interested in that was more accurate, really, than I think any other business. I've banked with the same bank for 20 years. They have some idea of what I purchased. They have no idea that I'm interested in all of these things. So this is an extremely powerful set of public signals that are available, and that potentially marketers can utilize. And the actions around the right-hand side of the circle there are important too, because these are the strongest public signals that are available. So the top right, or the top there is a retweet and gaining all this extra earned media. A reply is where you are responding one-to-one to a brand, and very valuable for a business. Or a favorite, where you're publicly saying, I'm interested in this content in some way. And then a follow, of course, is the fundamental one overall, and it has all sorts of connotations of loyalty, where you're choosing to follow the messages of a brand or a business or a person. So this is extremely important, and some of the numbers that drive all of this. The last public number that we came out with was 6 months ago now. It was 140 million active users. That was 6 months ago. We've been growing fast since then. Things have been going very well, but it's a very big and active platform. And the 1 billion number down there, it took 3 years, 2 months, and 1 day for Twitter to hit 1 billion tweets. Now we do 1 billion tweets, thanks to all of you, in 2.5 days. So this is a very, very large network with a lot of content, a lot of conversations going on out there if you can tap into them in a skillful way. And this point is crucial too, because I talked about the advertising products, a little about the interest targeting capabilities, the size of the network, and then there's mobile. Because Twitter has been a mobile platform from the start. It has mobile in its DNA. The 140 character limit was based on SMS text messaging a number of years ago. So the whole Twitter experience is perfectly aligned to the mobile. And all of these products are not only available on the mobile, but were designed for the mobile. Whether it's the organic product itself or the advertising products. On engagement, I mentioned the 140 million actives. 100% of those obviously are listening in some sense. And it turns out about 60% are tweeting as well. And then this one is maybe the most important thing to bear in mind for marketers here in the audience. And it's the engagement rates. And when I talk about engagement, as I mentioned earlier, it's clicking on a tweet, clicking on a link, replying, retweeting, favoriting. We are routinely seeing engagement rates of 1 to 3% and up into the high single figures. And in the case of the Porsche tweet earlier on, that was even more than 50%, and we do see that as well with particularly engaging tweets. But campaign averages are in the 1, 2, 3, 4% range. That's huge. It's really huge. I used to work in display advertising, and depending on the country, the typical click-through rates were 0.05, 0.07 in the case of the UK. This is a really, really big difference. And it enables you to tell your story and engage with consumers in a more powerful way. So taking all of this into account, the first-person perspective and the global conversations around shared experiences, interest targeting capabilities, promoted products, if I had... That's actually not part of the presentation. Dramatic music. If I had to describe Twitter in just a few words, the essence of Twitter, and many of you here are brand people, and branding is about finding the essence of something. It would be this. Twitter brings you closer. Twitter brings you closer to people you know, brings you closer to people you don't know, whether it's a Spanish midfielder in the locker room after the European Championship final, or whether it's a writer like Salman Rushdie who you've admired for a distance but will never get a chance to meet, or a president, or a street protest in Tahrir Square in Cairo, or a street protest in Madrid. It brings you closer. And then just finally, I noticed a few days ago that there was an announcement from the Royal Spanish Academy that 4 words have been officially added to the Spanish dictionary, I think from 2014. Tutear, tweet, tuiteo, and tuitero. So from me to you and from Twitter to you, muchas gracias. Hasta luego.